Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Hello. Okay, welcome to day 2 of the Alpaca Festival talks. If we didn't meet yesterday, I'm Jessica. I'm addicted to patterns like you guys. And yeah, we're going to get started with the talks. Do any health and safety or fun announcements?
Oh, be careful.
Be careful. It's been raining, not so much. Hello, people on the stream, assuming we're streaming already? Yep. We're not. Cool. They don't need to worry about health and safety. So first up, we have Lavanya, who's going to talk to us about Colam's Code and Culture towards a universal pattern language.
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. Is this good?
Is that okay?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to do my best to cover everything I can in 15 minutes. So let's get started. Colam's Code and Culture towards a universal pattern language. So when I get to the point of a universal pattern language, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about patterns, columns, what they mean to us. So when we look closely at the patterns around us, we begin to see how they've shifted in form, in meaning, as they've traveled across different regions, different cultures. So what if we studied these patterns not as static artifacts of the past, but as living systems of knowledge still unfolding today? You all might be familiar with this, the inlay work, the symmetry of the Taj Mahal. When we encounter it, we admire its artistry, perhaps the geometry that we see, the work of craftsmanship, the mathematics behind it, but we still frame it as an artifact, like something frozen in time. Fewer of us might be familiar with these. Fewer of us might recognize it, but these are columns. They're drawn daily in front of South Indian homes with rice flour. They're ephemeral, they're drawn, they're walked over, and they're remade the next day. In that way, they're not preserved, but they're practiced. Not static, but living. It's similar to one of those, those daily challenges like 36 Days of Type or Inktober that we see on social media, but this is eternal. It's been practiced for several years. So let's understand what a pulley column is. They're a type of column pattern drawn on a grid of dots. Now each dot, or pulley means dot, must be encircled exactly once using continuous looping lines. Some columns are made with a single unbroken path, while others use multiple interwoven loops. These patterns often follow symmetrical rules, radial, parallel, twofold, or more. So their elegance and precision have sparked significant mathematical interest. There's a lot of research papers about columns revealing the logic embedded in this traditional art form. Now, if you've been following the algorithmic pattern salon, You might recognize this work by Anuradha Reddy and Alex. Alex's exploration of sashiko embroidery and columns. So in this exploration, column takes another form in thread supported by sashiko embroidery patterns. So the pulleys that guide the continuous line drawing of the column with its evenly spaced grid, this sashiko stitch acts as a guide for thread to loop around the meeting points of these circles. And this helps the loops find their path in thread around these sashiko stitching patterns. So if we look at patterns from around the world, we might recognize several similarities, like interlacing, grid structures, continuous lines, various kinds of symmetry. You know, in Chinese knots, Rishnik patterns, Celtic knot, interlaced Celtic knot stone carvings, and the details inside the Alhambra. So these conceptual similarities exist by design. So what if these patterns that have structural similarities shared their knowledge and created together? So let's begin by understanding what makes a pattern, right? So if we look at these patterns, rice flour becomes columns. These threads turn into kente weaving patterns with the help of looms, and these rocks and marble turn into Islamic interlace patterns. So to make any of these forms, we need materials. These materials undergo processes, and then we have our resulting forms. So this is the algorithmic pattern salon after all. So what makes these patterns algorithmic? So a pattern is formed by regularly repeated arrangements. The algorithm dictates the processes and instruction and rules that the way these elements repeat. And what stood out to me here is, especially if given to a computer, so I guess the process has to take place here inside the computer, and now our inputs now become the characteristic elements that we can distinctly visualize, like shapes, lines, or colors. They undergo a set of operations, functions, logical rules that will be processed by the computer because it's an algorithmic pattern. And the output is a visual expression of this pattern, often built through repeatable logic, generative design. So our pattern system, like our algorithmic pattern system, looks something like this. We have an input process output model with what we just talked about. So we'll understand how pattern systems can collaborate when we break it down into a structure similar to this. So let's start by understanding what columns would look like in a pattern system. So it all begins with the grid, right? The set of dots placed in a specific configuration, the number and arrangement of these dots depending on the size of the column you want to create or the type of the column. And once the grid is set, the column takes shape through a few core visual elements. So the first is the straight line. It's a diagonal stroke drawn at a 45-degree angle. And this line allows you to traverse the grid and connect the curved arcs. Second, the curved arcs. These arcs are used to encircle or flow around the pulleys. They're not random. They're derived from, rounding a square's edges, a square that's rotated at 45 degrees, as you can see here, and are selectively curved, like the different permutations of selective curving of these edges. And these elements, the line and the curved arcs, form the visual vocabulary of columns. And it's shaped entirely by how we choose to configure the grid. So when we want to understand the processes, you can see that these arcs come together to form a continuous closed loop around the pulleys. You don't just travel along the grid using these arc combinations, you also loop back. You go back to where you started because it's a continuous line drawing and it's a closed loop within the same system. So you draw around the dotted grid so you can see how these archetypes combine with one another. And to guide the path, each one working in relation to the other. And one important thing to note is that archetype 3 is unique. It forms a closed loop. So we use it intentionally as the endpoint of a column. So this closed arc, path type 3, signals that the column has to start looping back. So this brings the entire pattern into a single continuous flow. So you can move through a single row, and now to cover a grid, you need to move through the rows and the columns. So to shift to the next row, we use the straight line that is path type 0, and that way we can move through the rows and columns of the dot to ensure that they're all encircled. So now we know how to move around the grid. So for a column to be fully formed, for it to be complete, every pulley must be encircled completely, and the line must return to its starting point, forming a continuous closed loop, right? So each path type has a specific way it needs to close in order to complete the loop. So when we've moved forward with path type 1, the arc, it's closed by another path type 1. And when we move with path type 2, it's closed by a straight line, and when we have a straight line, it's closed by path type 2. So it looks something like this. So this repeats 3 more times in each quadrant and comes together as the algorithm to generate columns, the output. So it's also important to note that we can have different types of columns. In this exploration, we're focusing on columns that are drawn with just one single continuous line, and it follows a 4-fold radial symmetrical structure. So as a pattern system, it comes together with something like this. So in code, we translate these visual elements to numerical values. So the path types are literally numerical values. And you can code this using a recursive function to loop the entered arrays to generate a pattern. So I could run this logic using Python turtle graphics. So it kind of looks something like this. So you can see that the numerical outputs correspond to the path types that we just talked about. And after defining the order and entering the path types that I'm doing here, path type 3 is added to the array at the endpoint of the column, and this sequence is repeated 3 more times. Now this is a beautiful column, but it's not quite as beautiful as this. It's not quite beautiful as the actual column. That brings us to something important that we need to consider when we translate the patterns we see every day into what we deem as algorithmic patterns. We're not just coding a pattern from scratch here. We're uncovering the logic that columns already hold. We're discovering the code that's always been there, that's always been embedded in tradition. We just have a new language now. And beyond logic and structure, why do these patterns matter at all, right? The columns drawn each morning, the tapestry of kente weaving patterns, the precision of orgy tiles, hand-knotted rugs, interlaced arcs, Kanchipuram silk sites. Why do we keep returning to them? And because they're beautiful, and we love beauty, and that's simple and that's powerful. So we have to ask ourselves, when we create today, are we honoring beauty or are we just building? Well, I mean, we're more advanced than we've ever been. We've automated design, we've streamlined production, we've optimized for scale. Shouldn't that mean we finally have time to focus on beauty? But here's the thing, beauty takes time, and speed and optimization does not wait. So we have a program now that can generate columns in seconds, geometry at scale, help us render and observe several variations because we're not running out of rice flour. So the real question is, how do we, okay, 2 minutes, we got this. So the real question is, how do we honor beauty while we systemize process? Can a pattern still hold meaning when it's mass-produced? How can this knowledge be shared to create something beautiful? We've already seen an example of two beautiful pattern systems sharing their knowledge and creating together, the column in embroidery form with the thread acting as a continuous loop facilitated by another pattern system, Sashiko embroidery. And we looked at patterns that shared similarities with columns from other parts of the world. So I came to look at this other knowledge system. Like columns, Islamic interlace patterns follow rules, symmetries, and transformations. And when we place these patterns alongside columns, clear resonances start to emerge. Both of these have elements of radial symmetry, interlacing forms, continuous line work. They're built from arcs and lines. And more importantly, they both follow a logic of flow, repetition, and transformation. So what happens when we take the visual inputs from one knowledge system, like the arcs and lines of Islamic interlace patterns, and process them through another logic, like the logic of columns? So we're not just borrowing style here, we're allowing two systems of meaning to collaborate through code. So can new beauty emerge when knowledge systems share rules, constraints, and creative intent? So when I look closely at the vocabulary of Islamic patterns, they employ similar formal elements, like curves, interlacing, repetition, a structured rule-based grid system. And what we see here are the fundamental visual elements that make up this interlace pattern, arcs, lines, and these would be our path types. But these simple forms, but turning these simple forms into the intricate language of Islamic interlace, it spans vast, and it's a pattern system that can be studied in its own right. So we're trying to see how we can share this knowledge, right? So what happens when we run the inputs of Islamic interlace patterns to the process of column? So a shared pattern system would look something like this. We have our input path types that correspond to, the visual elements of Islamic interlace geometry. And they would follow a similar set of transformations and processes of a column to generate a pattern more similar to interlace patterns, but a whole new variety of expression. So let's see this in action. So earlier we looked at the same program that generated a column, but this time I changed the inputs to use path types inspired by interlace patterns. And with a few more adjustments, the results start to look something like this. And these are some more unique forms generated by combining our two systems. So you notice how the aesthetic leans more towards Islamic interlace patterns while retaining something distinctly new. So this is a demonstration of how columns' underlying knowledge can inform and enrich the creation of forms that carry the characteristics of another culture. So this is what we see when we study patterns. Like this mirrors how beauty has always traveled across cultures, right? Like when we started off, if you move through regions, you can see how architecture reflects different style influences through time, culture, religion shaping identity. These visual forms don't just decorate the space, they shape identity. They tell stories of exchange, adaptation, and belonging. And when we recognize that, we begin to treat patterns not as fixed artifacts, but as living systems of knowledge, shared, shaped, and still evolving today. And thank you. Oh, we have time.
Thank you. That was wonderful. If you haven't looked at the conference proceedings, I recommend reading Lavanya's paper because you can try out those simulations for yourself. Because we started a bit late, we might just do one question. So any burning questions from the crowd? Okay, could you give me that?
Hiya, thank you. That's really nice. I love colams. I think they're wonderful. Just one thing that occurred to me when you were talking about translating the Islamic things into those. I mean, the Islamic art, if I remember correctly, and some of these other things like Celtic knots and things, they have a notion of overlap between connections, whereas if I remember correctly, colams don't really have that. So have you experimented with any notation for which line overlaps and the kind of depth? Because this is what I've struggled with when I've tried to implement pattern drawing things. If it's flat, it's easy, but then when you want to start representing this notion of one thing crossing another, it suddenly gets a lot more complex.
Are you talking about like when we talk, so there's interlacing, and when you say overlap, like it matters which is in front and which is, I've thought about this as well. I've actually studied columns like, as another pattern system as well. This is not the only pattern system that can illustrate columns. But I would say that column as a system does not have overlap that where the order of it matters. So it might be worthwhile to study the pattern system where this matters, right? Like Celtic. Some of them, yeah, they do, even in some of the examples I've showed you. Yeah, the order is like something I feel like I would need to study deeper, because like you said, it is difficult. It is something I've tried to look into before. But yeah, future explorations.
Cool. Also in the chat, not a question, but Anu was actually watching and says no burning questions. Just want to say this is wonderful and thank you.
Oh my God.
So can we have another round of applause, please?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, can we have Pastor Gang to the stage, please?
Are you projecting? You're not, are you sending something?
In principle, yeah.
Okay.
You also need to do
We're just going to stand up, yeah. Testing, testing. Oh, do you want me to You're the best, you are so organised.
you know, I think so, right? You're ready. Yeah.
Okay, next we have three representatives of an unknowable number of the live coding collective, Pasta Gang, and they're going to talk to us about, I can't see your slide talk, but it was jamming together far apart? Yes. Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all here. Also, welcome to the stream. We are.
Hello, I'm Mag, so you may have seen me yesterday, and I'm a member of Pasta Gang.
I'm Lucy. You may also have seen me yesterday, and I'm also a member of Pasta Gang.
And I'm Hannes, and I'm here because I'm a member of Pasta Gang. But we're only part of Pasta Gang. We're not the Pasta Gang. So who here in this room is part of Pasta Gang? Please raise your hands. Okay, everyone else also raise your hand. Go ahead, because you're all part of Pasta Gang. Woo! So these are some of the other faces that you might have seen on the internet on Pasta Gang. And we are like making the point because, well, this presentation will explain why this is the way it is. And now I've lost my train of thought. So I'm just going to continue. Pasta Gang, for me, personally, is like this radical open group of people jamming together. It's lots of learning stuff. I've learned to live code through Pasta Gang. I'm like the whole world of live coding opened up to me because of Pasta Gang.
Yeah, to me it's like this really just open kind of massively participatory collective where you all just get together and make space for each other's creativity, and it feels really energetic and fun to do that.
And for me, I'll talk about this a little bit more later as well, but Pasta Gang represents what I think is the real heart of live coding, which is kind of openness and the ability to experiment and make mistakes and to have safety in doing that.
So now we're going to show you what Pasta Gang looks like in practice. This is a screen recording of one of our sessions. And what you can see here is a massive just website called noodle.cc. You can go to it right now. And it's a big shared Strudel document. And each of these cursors with a name is a different person in a different browser all over the world. And we're all editing the same code. And we're all listening to the results of the same code. And the sounds and the lights that you're seeing are all done in this way. And anyone can join in. There's no password, there's no user, well, there are usernames. We don't like gatekeep. Anyone can hop on this website and join in the jam. And that's at the core of what Pasta Gang is doing. So Lucy's going to talk more about live coding in general.
Yeah, so I think we've just seen an example of live coding, and if you're at the concert last night, you will have seen me doing that as well, which is basically just people using code as a tool for live performance. Lou, don't come for me with my definition of live coding. And I want to talk a little bit, so I've been live coding since like the end of 2015, so quite a long time now. And when I first started live coding, I went to some workshops and I hung out with lots of really experienced live coders, and they all said live coding is about embracing error. It's about making mistakes and being okay with that. And it's about creating space for performances that are maybe a little bit wonky, or maybe your computer crashes and something goes wrong. And over the last 10 years, I've really tried to embrace that and take it to heart in my own performances, and to see that as something to be enjoyed and relished, and to move away from striving for perfection in performance. And I think that's a really important part of live coding. However, also over the last 10 years, I've seen an increasing movement towards like super polished, amazing live coding sets. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but I think for me, I really love that ethos of like it being fine to be a bit scrappy. And so when I encountered Pasta Gang, which has this built-in ethos of like anything goes, that we'll talk about maybe a little bit more later, that was super exciting for me, because I felt that really got back to the heart of what live coding was for me, what I found so exciting about it when I started, and what I felt was a very kind of permissive environment for new people to come in and try something out with like extremely low barriers to entry. Who's talking about this?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I went into the world of live coding through Pasta Gang. So for me, really big and important, but you can read in this quote of like someone comes in and says, "Oh, I'm just gonna like watch for a bit," and like everyone else is like, "No, please join in. Please do make mistakes because we all make them too." And for me personally, in the beginning I copied out like code, changed it to understand it, and then like pasted it in again. Side note, that doesn't work anymore. More on that later. And it's like join in and make mistakes. That's a huge part of what enables like new people to come in.
Yeah, likewise, Pasta Gang was also my first experience of live coding, and in contrast with Lucy, who's like an experienced live coder. And so this attitude of just join in and try stuff is really important, and like I wouldn't be standing here today without Pasta Gang making that effort. And there are all sorts, I think the fact that it's live coding makes it easy to influence the music without understanding music theory. I've taken part in traditional like jazz jams and folk music sessions, and those are still very participatory, but they have a much like higher level of background knowledge in order to be involved. Like I have the background to know all the jazz scales and play them like at the speed of you have to play them for a jazz song. But like that took years to get to that point. And likewise with folk music. Whereas with Pasta Gang, you know, the first half an hour I was in Noodle, I just left comments on other people's code going, "Oh, this sounds great." And then I was like, "Oh, maybe I can change that number." Or I saw someone do this earlier, and I like it when all the drums play twice as quick as they were before, and then they go back to half speed. I think that sounds really great. So I can do that, and you don't have to necessarily understand very much, really, to make that happen. And that's really enabling and a big part of it for me. So, oh, I'm still talking. So this is another part of that, which is we have these things called mantras, which scroll across the top of the screen on Noodle. And they're basically little mottos that we try and keep in the front of our mind when we're acting as part of Pasta Gang and in the rest of our life as well. So a big one of these is let code die. And this means, in even fewer words, make space. And it also means don't get hung up if someone else deletes your code, because it makes room for you to write more code. It makes room for the song to change, for it to progress, for there to be variance and interest, and it's also a useful attitude to carry into life in general. And yeah, we have other mantras. I don't know if either of you want to talk about one of them.
I will just continue to cursor land instead. From time to time, you see like little like ASCII art buildings or like rooms pop up in the room, and then people like sit there and enjoy the jam going on. And like these are representations of your own self as a cursor. Like your identity in the room is this little box with your name on it, and you can choose a color. And from over time, you notice that different like characters move differently, even though their name might change or the color might change. You can still recognize the people behind the cursors, and in a way, it's like an alter ego that develops through this medium.
Do I need to really say anything? I speak to this line. So yeah, as Hannes was explaining, like we all do have our individual identities within Pasta Gang, and we were at my house on Thursday night, like preparing for this talk and like chatting about Pasta Gang, and thinking like actually the three of us wouldn't have met. Like we all met through Pasta Gang, and now we're all like hanging out in my house cooking pasta on a Thursday night. And that is a very individual experience, right? Like there are individuals in Pasta Gang, but at the same time, because of the nature of the jam and because it's so open and permissive and anybody can join and anybody can delete your code or anybody can change your code, and you don't necessarily know who's done what unless you are really watching them at the time and you know who's behind that cursor. And so in a way, there is no I in Pasta Gang. And it's this really nice kind of duality and tension between people bringing their individual personalities to the jam, but then also not only like not having to worry about like who you are as an individual in there, but actually not being able to, because everything is so belongs to everybody, right? So as a result, everything that Pasta Gang makes is made by Pasta Gang. We have no individual kind of accreditation that like Lucy did this or Hannah's did this or Mags did this. Everything is by Pasta Gang, and so we let go of that pressure of attribution, meaning that, again, there's just that freedom to experiment and try things because you don't have that ego telling you, what if somebody thinks this is bad? What if you embarrass yourself? What if you do something wrong? It's just not possible. And really, it's not just about the jam, but everything is made by Pasta Gang. So not just the music and the visuals that we make inside Noodle, but also
the tool itself. Noodle is made by Pasta Gang, and like we don't check merge requests, we just click merge without reviewing, and then you get admin access and like can just push code directly without like the stupid merge requests. Just push it, and like we jam the tool, and you usually find people like in the tool and changing the tool, and then like, oh yeah, you need to refresh. I just changed the thing, and that happens quite a lot actually.
We also jam lots of other things. So one thing I want to say is we jam albums. So you all in Pasta Gang have now released 3 albums. Congratulations. You should put that on your CVs. But also, as Pasta Gang, you have written like 15 blog posts. Well done. And this is part of the blog. You can just contribute to it. We make it as easy as possible. You write Markdown and upload it onto Codeberg, or if you're me, you do it incorrectly and upload a HTML document, and it's different, but it still works. And we encourage anyone to contribute to this and give their ideas as to what Pasta Gang is. And we drew on this sort of collective knowledge as part of writing this talk.
My first contribution to Pasta Gang, I think, was a blog post. We also have a podcast, which is also very jam-oriented. So again, on Thursday night, we were at my house just chatting, and we thought, we should just record this and upload it as a podcast in a totally unstructured and chaotic way, which is now available on the internet for you to listen to us preparing this talk in a really roundabout way, so you can hear some of the behind-the-scenes background knowledge of why we're talking about the things we're talking about. Or you could actually just make a Pasta Gang podcast as well yourself. And we also jammed a paper. Should I talk about this as well? I can't remember who agreed. I think really quite early on in Pasta Gang's about a year old, by the way. Probably should have said that. Pasta Gang's birthday is next month. And quite early on, there was this idea that Pasta Gang could write some kind of paper about our shared experiences of the jam and of Noodle and meeting each other and making the music and visuals that we make and everything else that we make. And when I first came across Pasta Gang, I was so excited by it for the reasons I mentioned earlier. And I saw this paper on the website, and I was like, that's so cute, but that will never, ever happen. You can't just have tens of people randomly contributing weird bits of personal experience and text to a paper. Anyway, it turns out I was totally wrong about that. So somebody put us forward for this, one member of Pasta Gang put us forward for this conference. I'm actually not sure who. Yeah, Pasta Gang did it. And so then we had a deadline, and it was okay, we'll write the paper. And it was such an amazing experience, being in the shared document and seeing this paper unfold as we were writing it, and for the structure of the paper to emerge from pure chaos and kind of nothingness into something that actually made a lot of sense. And not only did we write this paper, we probably have enough material for about 5 other papers off the back of it. And yeah, if you have got time, please read it, because I think it's a really beautiful piece of writing.
And of course, we jammed this talk and these slides, and this QR code actually works. So we can live code talks now. And we finished this half an hour ago, as you do with every good talk, right? And it was a lot of jamming, a lot of podcasting while trying to do a coherent talk that goes over everything that we wanted to. Here. There you go. Check out our paper. Join us in Noodle, and also join us later at Delicious Clam at 9:40. That's us. Thank you.
I said, thank you, I love the ethos of this so much. And now I've lost my train of thought. So we've gained back a lot of the time we lost. So we're almost back on track now. So we'll maybe do 2 questions, what do you think? Yeah, any questions? Maybe give a chance to someone else. It'll be equitable there. This time.
Although as members of Pasta Gang, you should all be able to answer this question.
Okay. Yeah, my question was just about the mantras. I wanted to know if more mantras.
Oh, we can find them, right?
If you.
Yeah, I'll try and remember some. So one is actually a borrowed mantra. Well, there's a few borrowed mantras. So there's a borrowed mantra from Toad Pond, which is normalize sharing scrappy fiddles. There is only one room. This is the mantra right now. I think we have energy yes, quality no. That's also borrowed, but that's my favorite one. That's from an artist called Thomas Hirschhorn, who has a really interesting philosophy that I think is also important. I would have talked about it today if we had more time, but I'll try not to talk about it too much now. But look it up, which is about energy being much more important than quality when it comes to art. Yeah, here's the rest of our mantras. So we love repetition. That one's by Alex. Thanks, Yaksu. That one's about Alex. Fuck off AI music is about somebody we know. But also, I think these are all good, to take. Some of them are kind of inside jokes. There's a lot of inside jokes in Pasta Gang, like the crow sample and things like that. But also, a lot of these are ideas you can take into the rest of your life. And that's why I think when we were talking on Thursday, we talked so much about how Pasta Gang has kind of infected everything else we do. The ethos and energy of Pasta Gang has kind of crept its way into other bits of our life. So even when we're not actively doing Pasta Gang stuff, we still have a little Pasta Gang mind worm that is influencing everything we do. And now you also have that. So sorry for passing on the infectious disease.
I'm not sorry.
The mind worm is a spaghetti. The mantras I think are really cool because they're a way we try and influence the space and influence the jam to keep it being as Pasta Gangy as we as Pasta Gang want it to be. Whereas I don't think if we had those mantras and those reminders, it might kind of go in a different direction.
Cool. Any more quick questions? Oh, right here. Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing. I was very interested about the emotional buffer that you mentioned. In other words, that you are allowed, you are encouraged to do mistakes. Is there anything else that you see that it's creating a buffer for the persons that are participating in Pasta Gang?
By relinquishing your, everything we do is by Pasta Gang. So if you do a mistake, right, it's never your mistake, it's Pasta Gang's mistake.
Why did you point at me when you said that?
I didn't mean to point at you. That was Pasta Gang's mistake.
Pasta Gang pointed at me.
It's part of a fail happy thing, right? If you celebrate failure in a way, if someone makes a loud noise or something and everyone's like, oh yeah, actually that was amazing, then you make mistakes less costly for the individual. So it's you encourage a world where you're now words fail me. Where you may more happy to just try out new things because you don't know if they're going to fail and don't know if they're going to work out or not. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, but we can discuss later.
Okay, yeah.
It's like how we cheer at technical difficulties in live coding performances, right? If your computer crashes and it all goes black, everyone goes, "Hey!" And you enjoy that, even though, oops, the performance has stopped. You don't let it be a negative thing. You can just get back up and keep going. It's fine, and everyone in the crowd is still having a good time. It's a similar sort of attitude.
Also, just to add, it's really fun to play with friends, and I think that takes away so much of the pressure when there's a lot of you. It's I'm just such a small part of this big thing, and I'm having a good time with people I just met, and the performances, especially the live performances, are always like super chaotic because like everyone in the crowd joins and then Noodle crashes and then like nobody's laptop can handle it, so like the sound is like glitching all over the place, and it's just part of the atmosphere. So it's like part of the fun to have those failures, that failure mode. And I think it's so lighthearted and kind of silly that I think even if somebody came along and tried to like professionalize Pasta Gang or like make it really formal in a way, it just wouldn't work. And so it's kind of naturally defended from those kind of like difficult attitudes around like performance and creation.
There was a follow-up question. These togetherness that you experience, does that make you gravitate towards wanting to jam face-to-face?
Okay, so the audience member asked if the togetherness of Pasta Gang makes us want to gravitate towards being together face to face and jam together. I think for me, like, it's super nice. Like, it feels much more anonymous online. And so there is a slightly different feeling when you just like pop into the Noodle room from your computer at home when you're by yourself, like maybe with your headphones on, than like being in a physical space with the other performers. It does feel really different, but I think both are good for different ways, I would say. I don't know if someone else wants to...
I would say yes and no. Like, I really do want to meet lots of Pasta Gangers and jam with them, but I also would like to meet them just to meet them. Like, the jamming is kind of optional in a good way, and I'm also happy to just jam with them online in Noodle.
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. There are a number of Pasta Gangers in the stream as well. That's what I was going to say. So yeah, another round of applause for Pasta Gang, please.
This one?
Yeah, would you like it? You might need to move a bit closer, actually. So.
I don't know if you want to get it back in the meantime.
I mean, yeah. The microphone.
Marco, can you hear me? Can you try to speak? You are muted now?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Go. You open the presentation? I think we need an intro. Okay. Can we go?
Cool. Okay, next up we have in person, we have Rocco and Amadeo, and on virtually with us we have Marco. I hope I got all your names right, but I think I did. And they are going to talk to us about chickens. I'll let you explain further than that.
Thank you really much. We're really happy to be here. I'm Rocco Modugno. I'm a graphic designer. Can you hear me? Nice. Sorry. Oh. So yes, I'm Rocco Modugno. I'm a graphic designer. I usually work a lot with text, and I have a fetishism for patterns, as everybody here. And I'm here with two colleagues, Amedeo and Marco, that is following us online. Maybe you can get to present
That's Marco.
each other. That's Marco. Amedeo, want to spend a few words?
I'm Amedeo. I am a product designer. The physical type of product designer, I really dislike when they call product design the stuff on the digital world, but I ended up doing it anyway. Marco instead will briefly say something about himself.
Hello, I'm Marco. Yeah, I'm in Italy now, and I'm an electronic engineer, and I think I pose a foot on the artificial intelligence train, but the other is on the ground.
So Marco, I switch now to the presentation, and Rocco starts.
So yeah, we introduce ourselves briefly. So the presentation is going to work like this. I'm doing a short introduction. Marco is giving a math foundation to our work, and then Amedeo is showing an application of this work. So I want to start from history. Everybody of you probably knows Sébastien Truchet. Is really famous for Truchet tiling and so on. Truchet tiling, let's say, became important or were well known when Truchet was working for the Canal d'Orléans, and he went in front of a church and he saw this kind of tilings here. And so he asked himself which tilings could be made with this element here. And his great idea was a new kind of approach. Combinatorial calculation was still being discovered in that period, and he decided to do a short combinatorial studies on these tiles in order to create an ordered index, and from this ordered index he was creating composition, such this one. So yeah, the approach is more or less like this. You get the modules, you create some nodes that are permutations, and then you create composition. So then there is another important monk that took his work, that is Dominique Doigt. There is no portraits of him because all his work is considered to be Truchet work, but that's not how it was. And let's say he asked himself another question. He still was interested in the qualitative characteristics of the tilings, but also in the calculation of how many tilings could be made. In order to do so, he introduced a new kind of notation. This kind of notation is based on letters, so let's say more on typography than drawing itself. So what he was doing, after he associated a letter to any spatial configuration on the tile, he was combining the tiles through letters. So he was using the alphabet. The interesting thing is that in this way he was writing in order to draw. So that's what changed in terms of methodology. So he was able, let's say, just to write and figurate in his mind, in this virtual space that he created, how this would look like. He also introduced some generative rules that probably were present already in the work of Truchet, but he just didn't describe. So here you can see some of the configuration of his compositions. In 2023, it was demonstrated how his approach could be really interesting if united with the digital fonts, in the sense that as soon as you change one module, then you can easily change the whole tiling. So today we introduce this work that is called Count Your Chicken, so pattern generation as a matter of counting. Now, this is the first table of Sébastien Truchet. It's really interesting to notice that even if he was using a graphical method to combine everything, in this first table still also the notation of Doigt was present, but was not really adopted. But there is also another kind of notation that in this case is arbitrary, and it's the number notation. So let's say we start from these numbers in order to generate the nodes and the patterns. So when we are talking about chickens, from now on, we are talking about the nodes themselves. So now maybe I pass the word to Marco, that could give us a math foundation about our work together.
You can share the screen now, Marco. Okay, fantastic.
Can you see and hear me? Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me virtually here. So what we want to do is to create a robust framework to describe patterns. And so we want to handle pattern generation with a combinatorial approach by framing patterns which are permutations as numeric literals. What does it mean? Let's say we have a pattern, and in this work we focus on square tilings, so arrangement of modules in a square grid. Let's say you have this pattern. You want to associate a number to it, not in a sensible way. The first thing we do is we identify the modules. In this case, it's just two modules, so we will define a mapping to binary digits. In this sense, we then replace the module with the digits in the square grid. And of course, we unfold the grid into a string. This is really easy, but if you fix the mapping and the unfolding strategy, you can see that a pattern identifies just one number. I mean, one binary string. Of course, this process can also be done in reverse. So if you select modules, a mapping to digits, then generating a pattern is just writing a digit string, fold the string into a grid with the same rule, and replace the digits with the module. This means that by just counting, by just having a number, we can univocally identify a pattern. Of course, this binary string is the, let's say, natural way of representing a pattern made with two different modules, but we can change the base. So for having an easier name for the pattern, we can change the base maybe to the decimal one and see, for example, this pattern is the 2025 pattern of the 4x4 grid with two modules. In this way, generating a pattern is just counting them, meaning that saying a number is and the rules and setting the rules generates just the pattern that we want. What does it mean? It means that we can generate, for example, all the 4x4 square matrices, or really any other kind of pattern. So we have an easy way to generate all of them. What do we do? Well, we do not want to find some rules, catalog them, following some rules. Basically, you define an index of them. What rules? So now we are working with visual patterns, and so we focus on rules that apply to the square grid, meaning the symmetry of the square, the natural symmetry of the square. This doesn't mean this work only applies to patterns in a visual space, but of course we do a catalog of visual patterns. What does it mean? We start with say one node. We call this 4x4 grid a node, as Dominic Duha did. And we generate the related nodes by applying the subsequent symmetries of the square. So let's say we have all the rotations, we have reflections around the major axis, and as we have introduced the negation, meaning replacing the one with the other one, we can do the same with the negative and also the symmetries. So for a given node, we will identify 15 more nodes. So in our catalog, this node is associated with another 15 nodes, which form a group. But of course, it can happen, and it sometimes, and I mean, it frequently happens, that these are not univoc. So let's say the starting node is symmetric, for example, between, for example, as axial symmetry or diagonal symmetry. This will have duplicates, and so the symmetry identifies just a smaller of nodes associated with a specific node. We use this kind of reasoning. So these generate the nodes of a given set and filter based on rules to select some, like all the nodes that satisfy some properties in a given set of nodes. For example, choose the dichromatic symmetric nodes, which we call like this, which are the nodes that that you can obtain, that when negated and transformed with the basic symmetries, come back to the original nodes. So, for example, this, and we group nodes based on the symmetries that you use to obtain the node, the starting node. So, for example, all these nodes satisfy this constraint of being obtained with the same set of transformation when starting from the node itself. And we group nodes like this. I mean, by using these rules. And for example, so this is a way of cataloging nodes and of trying to manage the complexity when we have all the nodes in a set, like this. It's a sort of a top-down approach, let's say, meaning that we generate all the nodes, filter, and just some nodes trickle down in this group of nodes that share visual properties. We can, of course, this is just small nodes that we will use in larger and more meaningful patterns, of course. But within this schema of thinking, we can always come back to these nodes. So for example, these numbers are obviously the names assigned as we said priorly. So this notation is robust because each number identifies one pattern. It is universally available in programming languages, meaning that you all need strings, you need square matrices if you want to represent them in squares, and possibly the change of base notation to identify the nodes with a decimal or a more natural way of representing the nodes than the binary string. Of course, this is it. This identifies a framework for naming the nodes and generating them by counting. Now, my colleague Medeo will show you, let's say, an opposite approach, which is more explorative and less top-down of this one. The word to you.
Okay. Now we go to this. Okay. That was the nerd part. Now we got chickens. They are sneaky chickens. Actually, there's only one. It's this one. We hide it in plain sight. You can find it by activating it properly. Okay, so this is the chicken counter 1.0. So we hope to be able to expand it soon, but this is it for now. It's available online. You can check it out, do whatever you want with it. If you inspect any part of the code, you will be ashamed of how I can code this. Please don't resize the page. It will be disastrous. But you can play around with it. Okay, so we have established that we have nodes with binary digits that can be expressed in squares, white, black. 16 squares means to the 16th power. It's already quite a bit of information. How do we navigate it in a smooth, tangible, easy way? Enter the product designer that wants to make stuff touchable. So we can turn modules and immediately the identifier of our node changes. Everything we do immediately results in the pattern changing. And it's super fast, it's super intuitive how some of these properties have repercussions all again the graphics. On top of the basic node that we have defined, and I show you here, we have established a transformation set of rules that we call canons. Canons are down there. Now they are deactivated, but if we activate the first, repetition, we see that we just stack strings together and they become slightly more interesting, not so interesting, a little bit boring at this point. Paul Hallow that yesterday presented probably would enjoy this time of always the same, but our ties are way less interesting. So we need to find a better canon. Maybe we can negate and then repeat. Maybe we can alternate and then repeat. But what if we stack the canons in some strange ways? Suddenly the complexity goes, I would not say through the roof because we stopped at 3 nestings, but there's pretty much quite a bit of possibilities here. And we could just, in the next phase, add more canon nesting. You can explore it as you want. Anything that is red plus these 2 matrices are interactable. You can randomize whatever type of output you can imagine by clicking the title, or just feel free to look around. Just one note, here to the side, you see what is actually going on to the module. So like, for example, repetition is just node, 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 node. Negative repetition is negative of the node, etc. And so on. You can always reconstruct based on the information that we have on the paper, that you can find here, what functions are being applied. Lastly, you can do something with the graphic that you created. If you click on the red dot, you actually copy the final string that you can use for whatever graphic you want. On the paper, you also find the link for the custom typeface. This is a typeface, actually. They're not rendered squares. It's a binary font with only 2 glyphs, but you can use it. And if instead you don't want to take time pasting stuff, but just switch to chicken mode, you can download chickens. Spam whatever type of pattern you like. When you find one that is good enough, you can open it. This is a normal, fantastic chicken. Actually, the outer chicken is randomized out of a few different frames of this wonderful animation that a friend of ours created. And if you want, you can join us later at 7 something for the workshop at Panke. I don't know where Panke is, but I will discover it. I have a sad news. Unfortunately, transporting an old pen plotter from the 70s from Italy to here on a plane was not really that simple. So we ended up getting stuck with a printer. We will be printing chickens anyway. You're welcome later. Thank you very much. And that was it for Chicken Camp.
Thank you. I'm excited to make patterns with chickens. So that we have time for a little break before the next session, I think we can do one question, but also, do you want the next round of speakers to start kind of coming up to test your laptops? If you could do that. Hopefully you know if you're presenting. And yeah, who has a question? Question over there. For the people on the stream.
Thank you. Firstly, that was so cool. It all looks so great. I also really like the notation idea of like just turning it into a string of digits and then turning it into this number. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sort of assumes that it's 4 by 4. This like the number. So have you thought about including the dimensions of the pattern in the notation at all? So you could like make a 8 by 8 or a 16 by 16 thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. The point is that for this generation, all what we wanted was to reduce complexity in order also to be able to control it a bit. In fact, for example, here we are just using a binary system, but actually it could be quaternary, it could be also on radix 10 and so on. But our main aim was to reduce complexity at the moment, but we completely agree that for further developments, we should for sure do that. Maybe one last thing, Amedeo forgot to tell that the beautiful animation was made by Silvia Governa, and yeah, it was a great gift by her for our project, so I just wanted to underline this. Thank you really much.
Cool, okay, another round of applause, please. So we've got 10 minutes till next session, yeah, ish. Yeah, 10 minutes, and yeah, if the next session speakers could come up for testing, please. Thank you.
1, 2. If you'd like to take your seats, please. If you'd like to take your seats. Please wear your seatbelts. Return to your seats.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Don't stand in front of the speaker. Welcome back to our final sort of panel of talks as part of the festival. I'm Danica Meyer, if you've not met me yet. And we've got 4 speakers. And to start off, I would like to invite Sadiko Fedorova South, welcome, who's going to talk about overtonic pattern notation inside cross-cultural feedback loops. Sadiko's also, she's a PhD researcher at the University of Sheffield in the music department. And if you look out, she's also going to be playing as part of the musical festival tomorrow evening. So welcome, thank you.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here, so to listen my presentation. So, yeah. I will be today. Today I will present 2 interconnected ideas. The first is a model I call the feedback contours, which explains how cultural innovations circulate in global music networks. The second is a descriptive tool I have developed, the global geoharp notation, or GJHN, distinctive sonic qualities of geoharp traditions. Together, this offer a framework for understanding and analyzing the reciprocal exchanges shaping globalized music today. So, what is a geoharp? So, I'm looking at particular cultures and communities, and it's a social kind of field, and the instrument is called homs, which is I'm looking. So geoharp is a small lamellophone held against the teeth or lips, where its flexible reed is plugged to create a drone and overtones that are played shapes with the mouth and brace. And I did bring the instrument actual to show you the size, because in picture they look big, so I thought it would be good to show you the actual size. So this is like from Yakutia, it's a Siberia. It's a big kind of size, and then this is Norwegian mundharpa. So if you can see, they have the size. And my research is rooted in the Saha homus, northeastern of Siberia, demonstrates how this process unfolds in cycles and how digital platforms now amplify it. Within the feedback loop, there are many perspectives like political, social, cultural, and sonic. Today, I focus only on the sonic dimension. Traditional models of cultural diffusion usually assume a one-way flow from a source culture to recipient. In reality, however, musical ideas are not simply exported, they are transformed, adapted, and often reintegrated into culture of origin. For this reason, the Cambridge Dictionary definition of cultural diffusion, is like you see in a slide, is not adequate to explain the phenomenon I'm studying. To address this, I use the model of a feedback horn torus. This brings me to the second problem. The need for a descriptive analytical tool that can be applied for the feedback horn torus in order to explain how innovation spread and then feedback into musical traditions. To illustrate this, let's listen to the two examples I prepared. The first is a recording of Ivan Alexeyev titled Yunost, which is translated from Russian Youth, recorded and released on a Soviet vinyl record of Sakha folklore in 1970 in Moscow. So here, as you see, I transcribed this performance using staff notation following the approach of Nikolai Berestov in Yakutsk, who developed a method that emphasizes rhythm while omitting melody and timbral qualities. So Berestov himself composed orchestral works for Homus and relied on this rhythmic transcription systems. The second example is a Norwegian folk tune called Royskatten, performed by Oscar Saus, my research assistant. This version comes from the Munharpa forum booklet used in their teaching classes, which both Oscar and I attended during my fieldwork in Oslo in 2023. I transcribed this piece using a forum's own notation method. Their approach treats the jaw harp as a transposing instrument similar to the clarinet family. In their system, the notation always assumes a fundamental of C regardless of the actual pitch of the instrument. Both examples, the Sakha Homus and the Norwegian Munharpa, are shown here on the slide with staff notation and with spectrogram visualizing using the Tony software. This representation highlights a crucial point here. So jaw harp is an overtonic instrument, so melodies and timbres emerge primarily through overtones rather than the fundamental pitch. The fundamental tone indicates here as a blue line. Plays a relatively minor role in the perceptions of specifically jaw harp music, which as you can see in this blue line. It's like a drag. If it was singing, so it would be like kind of wavy, but in this case it's a jaw harp, so it's straight, just line. You only can see rhythms because there's between gaps between these blue lines, so that's how you determine. To illustrate this, I used the feedback horn torus, a donut-shaped figure with global jaw harp communities, Sakha, Norwegian, Vietnamese, Austrian, and others linked in a continuous loop. The cycle has 4 stages: innovation, a community develops new techniques or meanings; adoption, the others adopt these ideas with their own logics; mediation, form spreads through festivals, recordings, and digital platforms; reintegration, transform versions, return to the origins, and sparking new creativity or something like a new, completely new ideas of community, maybe even the meanings of that. Unlike linear diffusion, this model explains reciprocal transformation where communities intersect, the torus become spindle-shaped, a dense network of exchange, that one. So the Homus shows this vividly. So Soviet-era exchanges, festivals, and digital platforms created hybrids now influence Sakha musicians, blending Homus with trance, electronic, and global styles. So diagram shows the 3 forms of Tori here. So you can see how they all play a kind of crucial role here. So ring torus, horn torus, spindle torus. So major radius is global circulation. So you see here. So the minor radius is the local communities. And today, so this digital intersection intensifies this momentum of exchange of worldwide. So its momentum is the momentum where they connect to each other. So as an example, I prepared a short video loop. So I will give a description of that. It starts with a group Ayarkhan of 3 women, then shifts to Elena, who is used to be member of the group, solo with the backing tracks. Next, vowel filter techniques in trance music and Atai's vowel music from Western perspective styles, which is derived. This Western format returns to Siberia with Otikien, who frame hummus in contemporary ways. Finally, a new Saha player, Asian Joel, performs trance hummus using Ayarkhan style and traditional breathing and completing the loop.
Here's a track I've been working on.
So we're moving to next. If cultural circulation is cyclical and transformative, we need new ways to analyze the musical evidence it produces. Traditional staff notation captures pitch and rhythm, but misses the essence of Joe harp music, overtones, timbre, and phonetic articulation. Earlier systems reveal the gap. Berestov staff notation from 2000s tracked rhythm but ignored overtone structure. The Norwegian Monharp performance system added overtone pitches but treated the instrument as a transposing, which obscures the harmonic and timbral logic. So the Joe harp sounds is built on a fundamental pitch, but its richness lies in the overtone series intervals of octaves, fifths, thirds, and microtones that shape timbre. Like overtone singing, the mouth cavity acts as a resonator selecting harmonics. Yet, unlike overtone singing, Joe harp acoustics remain understudied. Well, I believe that. Comparable work in other traditions shows the need for idiomatic tools. So now we're going to beyond this, specifically Joe harp notation. For example, I give an example like University of California, Santa Cruz, Myers and Newman. They have been developing since 2023, 24, 25 IDTAP, Interactive Digital Transcription and Analysis Platform for Indian Music, extending Andrew Killick's global notation and Charles Seeger's mellograph. So they argue that Western notation and immediate microtonality, flexible intonation, and rhythmic nuance, whereas IDTAP captures subtle tradition-specific detail. In the same spirit, I developed the global Joe harp notation, designed specifically for the Joe harp music. So it layers this. So you follow this one: overtone pitch, middle staff, timbral contour, resonance shifts, melodic contour, emergence lines, glottal diaphragmatic effects, and the grounding fundamental. So this system captures not just what is played, but how it resonates, overtones, and bodily articulation, because it's a human body here. You use your diaphragms and your throat and your mouth cavity. Returning to earlier audio examples, Ivan Alexeyev, Yunus, and Norwegian tune Royce Cotton, which is we listened earlier, transcribe using those methods, which is I show here. So as a refreshment, I will little bit like a play around. This is Yunus. And then this is Royce Cotton. So here is a Royce Cotton fundamental is a A2, like maybe it's too small to see. Melody goes from 7th and 11th overtones. So you can see the inside. This is 16th overtones here, like precisely. And they're using open-closed throat technique creates that on and off lines. So this is like a on, like an off, and this like again open and then close and then open and close. And then here is in the Yakut Sakha playing is all the time open. So the mouse here, the throat is open all the time. So you can see clear line here compared to this. So this is a comparison. To analyze such practices circulate, I draw on, in addition, on actor network theory. Bruno Latour agency lies not only on players but also in non-human actants, festivals, instruments, blacksmiths, costumes, governments, and digital platforms. So this is all. Every object is actants, a playing role, and they're all equal to each other, and they all relate to each other. So, for example, YouTube, like YouTube algorithm, for example, play roles. So let's move to the next one. This is a concrete an example of how these ideas work in practice. And well, in 2022, musician Ataya released organic side trance with mouse harp on YouTube. This style features constant open glottal technique, producing rhythmic and timbral contours without intended melody. So as you see here. The trance aesthetic is intensified by electronic beats layered around the jaw harp. So using this GJHN to transcribe Ataya's performance, we can see clear parallels with earlier Sakha players such as Ivan Alexeyev, 1970s. Emphasizes rhythm and timbre over melody, yet Ataya's work also reflects the mediation stage of the feedback torus. It circulates through festivals, social media, algorithmic recommendation, reaching audiences far beyond his local community. So let's listen to this, Yeah, and his playing similar to Sakha Spectrum, as we see, it's like already visually you can see. So it's all the way that is open, like this. This is purple line, and then this is like a shows that how he has been always using the open glottal techniques, and it goes frequency between 6 and fundamental is 72 Hz between C flat and D. Similar to Sakha, there is no melody, as I said already, and the rhythm and timbral part again both 1152 Hz, meaning goes beyond 16 overtone beyond here. So it just shows that how you can see feedback loop coming back and similar to Ivan Alexeyev's playing. Reintegration is already visible, so I said there's a recent jaw harp Homs player essential now blending those side trance and side techno, specifically explicitly drawing on global electronic genres. Similarly, groups like such as Otoken incorporate global market authentics and industry practice into performances marketed internationally. By combining this feedback contours and global jaw harp notation, we gain both theoretical and analytical framework. Together, they also move beyond older models. Instead of one-way diffusion, of cultural diffusion, we see cyclical transformation. Instead of a pitch rhythm notation, we capture resonance and timbre and articulation. So, well, to talk about this diagram, this is like a contours, so a spindle between, you can see. So I'm showing the spindle case where these cultures intersect, and then this is actor network theory method is going on there because it's covered of the all communities, even here between and here. So and then let's say this is like from Sakha, from Soviet music was created, and then this like start to travel, and then the more this circles apart before digital era, before internet, so they were slowly traveling to each other and becoming closer to the major radius outer loop, and then this is like inner loop shows what is internal culture, like playing techniques and what kind of Johar specific cultures they're creating, or is it traditional? It depends from the culture. And then because of digital era in our time, they become more intersected like this and more faster moving and recyclable and repeating as like a cycle. So to conclude, the feedback horn towards models cultural exchange circular transformation, as I said, so the GJHN represent the distinctive sonic features of Johar traditions. Together they show how innovations circulate globally, shaped by human and non-human actors before returning home in hybrid forms. And in the future, research will apply these tools in a large comparative project across Johar communities worldwide, exploring not only acoustics, but also cultural, social, and political dimensions of the instrument, global journeys. So like this, and then in the end, I say thank you to you. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, you can drop me an email. Visit my website. And tomorrow I have a concert, so yes, thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. We have only a few minutes, so perhaps just one question. Does anybody have? Yep.
A simple one to start. Can you use that notation to play from? Is it possible for you to play the tunes from that notation, or is it mostly used for analytical stuff?
This is not prescriptive notation, it's a descriptive notation, so it's a different where you're using for analysis, and then there is a prescriptive when intended for only for players, so player can see and know what to play. In this case, you're analyzing, and for your research questions, for example, if you want to see specifically some parts of that culture or phenomenon, so I use for that. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sadiko, for your presentation. Perhaps more questions can be addressed to her later on at her performance or after our panel this afternoon. So thank you. Okay, we'd like to invite up James Walker to speak next. So James is going to talk to us today about reflections on London Pattern Club. So welcome, James.
Thank you. This bit is extended.
That's fine.
Yeah. Are we able to... Hold on. Okay. Right. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay at the back? Yeah, great. Hello to people on the stream as well. My name is James Walker. I'm one of the organisers of London Pattern Club, And that's kind of what this talk is about today, is about my journey of starting it and how it's changed, what kind of challenges have cropped up through the way. So I thought I'd just start by saying a little bit about myself and my sort of motivations for starting this group. If I can change that. Cool. So I sort of describe myself as a creative technologist, which really just means that I enjoy working with technology in creative ways. That's more of a hobby, and my actual job is as a product manager for a mobile app. So all of the stuff I'm about to describe now is not my job. This is very much like a passion project for me. I particularly enjoy working with sound and textiles and live coding interfaces like tidal cycles and Strudel, which I sort of first learned about in 2021. Kind of discovered that through the kind of algorave scene in London, and then while it was the lockdown, I sort of learned tidal cycles through some of the tutorials that Alex had put together on YouTube, and that kind of opened up basically this whole world of how algorithms are cropping up in different ways in weaving and in knitting. So another thing that I'd started doing during lockdown was knitting, and I really enjoyed that just as a way to spend my time, and sort of through looking at the way that knitting patterns work and thinking about scripts in programming languages, I suddenly saw all these similarities that there were through things like knitting and weaving. And yeah, something that I quite like about live-coded music is how often very simple patterns are combined for quite rhythmically interesting results. So simple things are kind of being transformed, and then the results of that are being transformed, and then through that you end up with these very complex patterns that have kind of grown out of very sort of humble origins. And that's something that I've noticed in knitting, and when I'm working with sort of yarn and fiber crafts as well. Often they're quite simple patterns, but they're alternated and they're combined in ways that produce very visually interesting outcomes. So with that in mind, when I first learned about Sheffield Pattern Club, I was really intrigued because I really liked this idea that there's something in common between computing and crafting, which is like the use of algorithms and this focus on patterns. So I think this was around 2023, and I got in touch with Alex, Lucy, and Ray shortly after they began organizing their workshops, and I asked about setting up a similar group in London, and they were very encouraging about it, and they gave me their permission, even though I'd never run or organized any sort of community event in my life. So I decided to set up London Pattern Club, which is heavily inspired by Sheffield Pattern Club. And I usually describe it as a craft group and a social space for people who are interested in algorithmic creative practices. And by algorithmic creative practices, I mean some of the things I've described, like live coding, knitting, weaving, drawing Kolan patterns, all sorts of things that involve the use of patterns. But I try not to give a very fixed definition of it, because I like it to be sort of open to interpretation, because I like this kind of process of discovering always that there are algorithms nested within other things. So the really important thing for me is just that it offers a space for people from different disciplines to meet and see what they have in common and share ideas. So just in terms of our timeline, around 2023 I was living in southeast London, and a new event space had opened called Set Social, which is in Peckham. And at the time they were looking for groups to use their community space. So I messaged them with this idea about a series of workshops that would combine crafting and creative coding. And in those workshops, I think there were maybe 4 of them that I ran each week. We looked at things like kumihimo braiding, creating art with processing, making music with Strudel. But these workshops, they basically required quite a lot of prep on my hand. And one thing I noticed was that people who came to the workshops really enjoyed the more hands-on craft activities. So like there was one where most of the workshop was just making these very low-cost kind of looms out of cardboard and just teaching people the basic principles of weaving. And I felt like people actually enjoyed that more than the kind of taught, the more sort of programming aspects of it. So that was kind of one facet in making me want to shift it from a more creative coding focused thing to a more of a craft focused thing. Another factor was that within even just Southeast London alone, there are a lot of different groups that are already covering creative coding. Like we have live coding, like algorithms events that Dan puts on. There's creative coding craft space, there's a creative coding book club. So basically it's very well represented in London, and I didn't feel like I had to repeat what other people were already doing. So that kind of prompted this shift towards really just focusing on crafts. And I really wasn't aware of any other groups that were like craft groups, but thinking about programming and thinking about algorithmic creative practices. So that was kind of my motivation for how it's changed a little bit since then. After those workshops at Set Social, I sort of just ran a craft group at the Ivy House, which is not far away. And then in 2024 moved to a different space called The Glitch, which is in Waterloo. And that was for a couple of reasons. One was that it was just a bit easier for people to get to because it's a bit more centrally located. Another thing is that they have a kind of, at the time they had a workshop space in their basement, and it just meant that we could both have a craft group and then occasionally run workshops about things like strudel or processing. And then this year we started doing events at the Peckham Pelican, which is opposite one of the University of the Arts London campuses. And that's been quite good because there's quite a lot of crossover between, in terms of interests, like a lot of people from UAL are quite interested in our group. And Marissa, who kind of co-organizes with me, is a lecturer at the UAL. So that was kind of what prompted the move to that venue. So I'm going to name drop a load of different people in loads of different groups now, because I think the most interesting and fruitful part of organizing this for me has been like coming into contact with different groups, and just to like highlight a few of them. One of them is London Lace Club, who are a fantastic group that teach bobbin lace making. I think they do their event, it's bi-weekly, and it's in North London. But yeah, bobbin lace is fantastic. Like if you want to, if you're thinking about like algorithmic crafts, it's really like, you know, the pinnacle of it. And they collaborated with us to do a workshop, which went really, really well. It was one of the highlights of it. So also Peckham Digital, who run a yearly festival, sort of creative computing festival. And we're going to be collaborating with them in about a week's time for an event at the V&A that I'm talking about in a sec. Another highlight, working with artists and designers. One of those is Emil Woodenberg, who looks at essentially like building your own website, trying to move away from platforms like Wix and Squarespace, and trying to essentially like take back control of your own data. So Emil kindly ran a workshop with us that was focused on like trying to show how you could build a website for yourself using very, very simple tools. And that was like a little bit of a departure from the kind of algorithmic creative practice theme, but I felt like it was a very relevant thing to be sharing with people. Another artist is Sophie Nadel, who works a lot with machine knitting. And Sophie came to one of our craft groups, and Sophie's been working a lot with using machine learning and knitting, and using machine learning to create knitting patterns. And Sophie's got a book coming out in, it's in a few weeks' time actually, but talking about that process of machine learning, generating knitting patterns, and I interviewed them for that book. So that was like a very fruitful kind of collaboration that came out of running this. In terms of academic networks, So there's the Material Programming Research Group that's based at UAL and I think Chelsea College of Art, which is run mainly by Agnes Cameron and works a lot with, essentially Agnes runs a book club called the Knit Tech Reading Group, which I would encourage everybody to look up and join because it's very open and anyone can attend. But it's looking at thinking a bit more about the technology of machine knitting and the way that the knitting machines are designed and what knitting actually is, and kind of getting into these philosophical conversations about it. So both me and Marissa are a part of that. And another group is the Unstable Design Lab, who are based in University of Boulder, Colorado. And they produce an amazing open source software called AdaCAD, which helps you, it's like a node-based visual programming tool, but for making binary patterns and specifically for e-textiles. So that's a really nice design tool that I've also contributed to. And the other fact is like publishers, working with publishers. So one of those is HoloBiont, and they produced a magazine recently called Soft Issues, which was looking at the idea of softness. And one of the things, so I wrote a bit about London Pattern Club as an article for that, and talking a bit about how I wanted to, talking a bit about the ethos of it and the motivations behind it. And then another publisher is Emma Crabtree, who writes a yarn and fiber publication, who is publishing Sophie's book, which is the one on the right. So without organizing this group, I wouldn't really have come into contact with all of these different with this network of people. And I think there's a very, very rich network of individuals who are working on like similar themes, not just in London, but essentially the main challenge is, as I guess what I'm thinking about is how can I, rather than reproducing what lots of other groups do, but how can I work in collaboration with different groups, and how can we kind of work together? So one of the challenges has been balancing organizing this with my other responsibilities, because obviously I have a job, and I was doing a degree this year as well. So both Marissa and I are quite busy, and it's meant that I haven't really been able to organize our monthly craft groups as often as I would like. So that's one challenge, is just time. Another issue is funding. The way that our sort of funding model works is we advertise our events on Luma, and we allow people to give us donations for those events. And those donations go onto an account on Open Collective, which is like a transparent budgeting tool. And then we just use that to pay for materials, promotional things. So that's our kind of funding model at the moment. But I think to do things that are a bit more ambitious, like inviting guests, doing events, running workshops, then we would need more of a kind of reliable funding stream. So I think my next job will be to like look at funding applications, or think about ways to find grants so that we can continue doing what we do. In terms of the next steps, as I mentioned, we've got an event in collaboration with Peckham Digital next weekend at the V&A, which I think is going to be really fun. It's going to be around like making low-cost e-textile sensors that you can use to make music. And we're going to be planning events for 2026 as well. Something else I have in mind is like a booklet of algorithmic craft things that people can do, that perhaps like people can take away from the craft group. So those are kind of what I have in mind at the moment. And I wanted to kind of close by like posing a bit of a prompt to the audience, which is like, what do you think makes a volunteer-run group sustainable? You don't necessarily have to answer this, but I think it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is whether these challenges that I've highlighted are actually challenges, whether we do actually need more funding, whether Pattern Club needs to be more than what it is at the moment. Yeah, if anybody has thoughts on that, I'd be quite interested to hear it, but also practical advice about how to meet some of the challenges that we have. And then, yeah, any general questions as well, like happy to answer those. But thanks very much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you very much, James. My quick response to your discussion would be a good committee to share the load. Don't worry about chasing funding all the time because that will suck up all your time rather than doing the project. Those are my two quick advice things. But is there anybody who has any questions or any further thoughts or want to contribute to James's question that he pointed out to us all? Yeah. Don't trip.
Many thanks for sharing. I was wondering, how do you, or what do you mean by ambitious, and how do you see that? Well, yeah, the definition of scaling and the ambitious meaning.
Yeah. So when I think of it, I think of events, maybe not quite on the scale of what's happening this weekend in Sheffield, but definitely being able to do more workshops, inviting other craftspeople in to teach what they're doing, running events or having collaborative music performances, things that combine textiles and creative coding. So essentially just a little step beyond our craft group, which is just something that kind of happens once a month and people will come along and chat, which is really lovely and I want to continue doing, but I also feel like I'm not doing justice to the theme and the potential of what we could be doing. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, that's what I have in mind.
Anything else? Yep, one over here.
Hey, hello. Thanks very much for that. I think, I really like this as a big prompt about how to organize around all of these activities. So that's thanks very much. And I think me and Daniel were just whispering to each other that I think one of the things I've noticed work really well with the London live coding community is that there's a really blurry divide between who's an organizer and who's an attendee, and I think that's worked really well. So I would actually, challenge a little bit the idea about having a committee. I think there's definitely benefits to that, but one of the things that's worked really well is having guest hosts of the live coding meetups, and to really set the tone that anyone can get involved. And I'm curious about what you think about that, about have you asked for help from people in the community, and how's that gone, and do you have any tips around that too?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When I've kind of lent on other people and organisers, like London Lace Club, for example, I sort of approached them and said, would you like to just do what you ordinarily do, but we'll kind of make it a collaborative event. So I was really just taking care of getting the space booked and organising it while they did the actual, I took a back seat and then they were running the actual event. And that worked really well, I think. So that's I think something I'd like to do a bit more is just inviting people and being we'll host you, just to take a bit of the burden off of myself. But also, I think there's the question of money, and I know that's something that you guys have been thinking about as well, where it gets quite complicated because, I think people deserve to be paid for their time. Often we're only just breaking even if we're talking about donations and charging for this group. So it's kind of a tricky one, is where do you just managing that. I don't know how to word it, but is where it gets a bit complicated for me. Yeah.
Maybe one final question or comment all the way at the back.
Hi. So I'm going to say the maybe unpopular thing and say you got to make money. It's got to be a business. I mean, I think there was an era in London when we had a bunch of workshops that came out of kind of anarchisty, whatever-y software developy organizations like Open Lab. There's at least 3 or 4. There was MizTech, Code Design, and we all kind of ran it like, I'm not going to say like capital B business. Like we weren't charging like, I mean, some people charge insane amounts of money. Like there's the Microsoft funded ones that give you a degree at the end and all that. But it was like 15 to sometimes even like 40 pounds for like, you know, workshops, multiple workshops, sometimes up to like 100 for like if we were going to do like, you know, a 6 workshop block. But it was good because you get some money up front. If it's a number of weeks, you get some money, you can have a space, you can book someone. I mean, you kind of need to get some money to do some things, and you can make a surprising amount. People really want to like give not that much money up front in order to have like a good experience, and if someone good's going to come in, they know it's for like the community. But it takes a ton of work. I mean, it was, for me, it was like kind of, I didn't really have much of a job at the time, and I was part-time lecturing, so something I could do, and I promoted it, and I did the mailing list, and I did the funds, and I ran into trouble with the funding because, you know, I'm actually a dual citizen, and I realized I can't take money anymore because the US laws actually suck like you not believe. So there's real implications in it, and it's like you're either donation level like you guys are at, where you're doing, I think you guys are doing pretty well, to be honest. But if you do make the jump, it is a business. That's my advice. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just saying I've done it for a bit. I do it at university now. You know, I pay people to come in, but, you know, the other thing I'll say, and I mean, by the way, I don't think it's daunting. Like, you can do it as a person. Like, it just takes work, and you just got to have a head for it and get a good accountant, like I have. That's it. I mean, people will do stuff for cheap for you. But you know, we have lots of really good organizations, and you guys could post more. I see that you guys interact, but I mean, like, there's also Dorkbot, I would say, which has been long dormant in London and really needs some people to help out. And like, there's space, and there's people involved in a big mailing list, and like, no one really takes advantage of that. Okay. So maybe talk to us about Dorkbot too.
Yeah, well. Yeah,
apologize for all the London-centric stuff that I've just said to everyone here.
Me too, by the way. Like.
But you know, yeah. Okay, cheers.
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, only to say, I think for me a big part of it is that I want our workshops to be like affordable and accessible, and sometimes I see people kind of, you know, they will advertise like hand weaving workshops, but they'll be like £140, which I just feel is, and you know, people go to those, but I think for me, it's like, I want it to be affordable. So it's kind of a balance between like making enough to justify or to sustain the group, but also not putting up like such a financial barrier to people that it can't be that they can't attend. So no, I think I totally understand what you're saying, but it's something where I have to kind of decide like what's a reasonable perhaps like tiers, maybe because I see lots of groups doing different tiers where it's like if you're waged or unwaged, something like that comes to my mind. But yeah.
Thank you, James. Give everybody
you.
A round of applause. Okay, we're going to welcome up Lee Tussman. Okay, so Lee is going to talk to us today about encoding and experimenting with vernacular quilt patterns.
I think I'm loud enough, yeah. While I'm setting up and testing something really fast, I've done a lot of organizing in DIY spaces and now work at a university. And I've run a nonprofit, so my other quick tips are you can always sell drinks. That's a great way to make some money for that night, right? You can get sponsors, obviously. You can write grants, but yes, then it starts becoming your business. It's true. Can I start? Great. Hey, everybody. My name is Lee Tussman. I'm I'll give you my real title. I'm Associate Professor of New Media and Computer Science. I'm at SUNY Purchase College in New York. I'm currently on sabbatical, and I'm based in Berlin currently. And I'm excited to visit. This is my first time in Sheffield. Today I'm speaking about encoding and experimenting with vernacular quilt patterns. I'll put this info at the end of my talk too, but just if you're looking for me online, Lee Tussman, there's my website. I also have a podcast called Artists and Hackers. It is on art and code and community. Would love to interview a lot of the artists and programmers and educators and weavers and other pattern makers here that have been here this weekend. Going to start here. I'm from Pennsylvania, specifically from Philadelphia, not too far from Amish country. These are quilt blocks on the bank barn. These are various patterns. Now, growing up, I actually have a mother who is not a quilter, but she does embroidery and sewing. And from a young age, not only did we visit Amish country, but my mother would actually do embroidery of Amish quilts. And so these kinds of patterns are something that I absorbed from a really, really early age. As I got older and just out of college, so I started sewing from a young age, but just out of college, I started making my own quilts. This is my studio about 15 years ago. I have a Juki industrial in the bottom left there. There's a piece I'm working on in the top center, and then scraps on the floor that I'm cutting out, and then on the right side is another quilt. Here's some of my earlier finished work. These are 5 different quilts. It's hard to tell the scale here in a projection, but some of these are quite large. I only know feet, not meters and centimeters, sorry. So, you do it, great. So these are like, the one on the top right is probably like 10 feet wide, 6 feet high. The one on the bottom right is actually the biggest. That I think is 12 or 13 feet high. In addition to using fabric textiles, I use Tyvek envelopes, shoes, things like this, all sewn together. Right here, this one is a variation on a housetop pattern. Come back to these patterns in a second. So this didn't come out of nowhere. I mentioned before being raised near Amish country and really enjoying quilts from that region. But I also want to talk about some other quilts that influenced me too. These are Gee's Bend quilts. These come from the Gee's Bend quilters in Gee's Bend, Georgia. Really long history. And I just have a few of many, many, many patterns that you could see, many quilts that you could see. Loretta Petway is one of my favorite quilters from that community. In the center, there's this absolutely gorgeous housetop pattern, also from Lucy Mingo. And the housetop pattern is one of my favorite quilt patterns. On the right, you can see the other part of quilting. When you just look at a quilt, you don't necessarily see this, but maybe you think of it, which is like, how are quilts assembled? Many of you might be aware that quilting actually refers to the technique of sewing the front to the back with some batting in between, right? It's the actual connection through those 3 layers. That's quilting, and it's often done in matriarchal quilting communities. Women gather and they do the quilting together. And I don't necessarily mean they sew the front together. I do think that occasionally it happens, but it's often that people will bring the front, essentially, of the quilt, and then they actually quilt through it together to assemble. And again, I mentioned Amish quilting. These are some Amish quilts. In the bottom left, there's the Roman bars pattern. In the center, there's the bars pattern. And in the bottom right, there's a log cabin pattern. Okay, so these are geometric patterns, largely, though not entirely, square. Triangles obviously figure, and there are non-triangle, non-square patterns as well, but these are by far the most common. Okay, so I'm going to jump to a live code for a second here. Just going to actually, I said live code, but it's honestly. Several years ago, I got really big into this game engine called PuzzleScript. PuzzleScript is an open source HTML5 puzzle game engine for making largely top-down games. Oh, it doesn't work in this browser. It's okay. You can see these are square patterns, right? If we click to make a game, so the whole editor works inside a browser. On the left, you have basically your engine here. It is a programming language. You actually you write a pattern-based language here. Here you draw your levels out, and you actually make your sprites. That's the word I'm looking for. In the top left, you could just start with just a color, but I'm going to load an example like an eyeball. Here's an eyeball right here. You can see how it's done in this pattern. Here is a little person. This is the player. I'll click to start. Okay, so here's our player, right? You can see the player on the right side of the screen. You can see the players drawn here with colors and the individual pixels, again with the eyeball here. And then we have our rules for moving the player around. Okay, if I move the player right, click in here. Okay, so the eyeball follows the player. That's what this says right here. This is my little setup. You can see this is a 5x5 grid. This is when I got interested in basically low resolution grids. So this is kind of my impetus right here. So we're going to jump back here. Okay, put that aside for a second. We're going to come back to that. Has anyone heard of NaNoGenMo? Okay, I see a few hands. NaNoGenMo stands for National Novel Generating Month. It's an idea originally by Darius Kazemi in 2013. Darius had read that National Novel Writing Month, which is much more popular and common, only requires that you turn in 50,000 words. That is a novel. So they didn't explain how you had to generate the 50,000 words. So this is when Darius came up with the National Novel Generating Month, something that I've participated in for the past decade. And this year I got an idea to create a 50,000 word series of poems, essentially, using quilt patterns. The way that you participate is you open an issue on the GitHub for NaNoGenMo each year. I posted that I wanted to participate making quilt poems. But I couldn't find any patterns of quilts. I found lots of weaving patterns. I found player piano patterns, but no quilt patterns. So I started making my own. And first I just assembled a list of quilt types, and I think I maybe did 25, 30, something like that. Okay, so the next step is, how do you actually get these patterns, since I couldn't find them? Now we jump back to that PuzzleScript thing. I chose a very low resolution to start. I chose an 8x8 grid. This is for a few reasons, but partly because I could visually look at a quilt and translate it into an 8x8 grid. So here's an example. This is one of the G's Ben quilts. This is a housetop pattern. This is, on the left, me turning it into an 8x8 grid. These numbers represent different color blocks. And this is just one version of a housetop pattern right here. Okay, so this is how I encoded it. I could show more examples, but I'm just going to actually show what I did with this next. So next, I made a series of experiments. This is one example. I'm picking from a corpora of lots of different bodies of text to create some poems. This is from early on. This is basically my devlog as I'm attempting to make quilt poems, visual poems, in the pattern of various quilts. And instead of colors, although here you see it with colors, I'm pulling a word for each color and assembling a quilt. That was the first version. I decided I did not love that and that it didn't need color. So I'm going to show a few examples here. I ended up making a chapbook, but in that process, I also assembled a quilt a day, or a quilt poem a day website, where each day it generates a poem. And again, these patterns are derived from that encoded 8x8 pattern system, where instead of color, each of those numbers represents a word. And it's pulling from a different corpus of text for each of these poems. Here's a bar. We saw the Amish bar pattern earlier. Another one down here. Actually, there's a few bar patterns. There's a checkerboard pattern here for this quilt. This is a bullseye quilt, so it goes towards the center and diagonals and then in a cross. Again, I assembled a chapbook with these poems and then distributed them, and I actually have some with me, which I'm happy to distribute to people. I can run this live in my terminal. Okay, so I just generated, I think, 1,333 poems. And here's the daily quilt poem. The next experiment that I did, I worked with feeding in my own photography and using that same pattern, picking snippets of photos and animating them. So you can see some examples here. In the top left, it lists the pattern that it's drawing from. So this is a variation on crazy quilting. Another one. The little coins quilt is a personal favorite. I experimented with these photo grids being static as well. I happen to like the animation. Show one or two more. Lazy gal, or basically sideways bars. These names are informal. They're passed down. Some of the patterns have multiple names depending on the community that they're from. Okay. This is Pico 8. You can see, whoops, I forgot how to reload. But anyway, doesn't matter. Next, I used the same quilt patterns, adding some fake stitching, as you can see here. This is in Pico 8, which is a game engine that I really like and use. The same creator, Pico 8, which comes from Lexalawful or Zep, also made Picotron. This is the newest, which is a virtual workstation or a fantasy workstation. I'm going to run it inside of Picotron. This time, I'm using kind of a fake 3D effect with these. They look like balls, they're circles. And to give this kind of 3D effect, again, feeding the exact same data in with just very slight variations on my code. Lastly, I just want to talk about maybe my next steps. This is something I'm very much in the middle of. One thing is 8x8 is obviously not a standard size for a quilt. Quilting has no standard size. So I've started to experiment with much larger grids. This also allows me to do kind of pseudo triangle patterns, which are pretty common in quilting. Another thing I want to do next is digital embroidery, taking it back. Again, it started as a textile. I've encoded it into this digital format, but then using digital embroidery machines to using these patterns. Experimenting with weaving, because these patterns actually could be woven. Adding more quilt patterns. I think at this point I have 36. And then kind of the final thing I want to do is, it's really natural and normal in quilting to have all these variations. Okay, we have the housetop pattern, but if you do 4 of them and then one of them gets switched upside down, well then that's another variation. And these are not formalized in any way, it's just a natural part of quilting to experiment with that. So maybe building in some generative process to actually get even more variation. Again, my name is Lee Tussman. Here's my contact information and my podcast. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Lee. I too am originally from near Amish country and found that very exciting, so exciting. Is there any questions or comments from the audience?
Hi, thank you for that. That was really interesting. I was interested particularly in your use of game engines, and wondered whether that came from previous experience with game engines, or it just kind of fitted what you wanted to do? Like, what's the reasoning there?
Great question. Thanks. I love game engines, and I make my own and use them all the time. I think games have I think various of these pattern communities, right? I'm going to say this is the pattern community, but there's also obviously these subset of pattern communities. And there's a whole ecosystem in that particular thing. It could be knitting or weaving or live coding, right? I think that's true around games in general. I think they provide a nice package to some degree. There's a framing when you use a game engine. And I think that's something that I really like. Particularly, I showed Pico 8 before. And Pico 8 has a sprite editor built in, a code editor, a sound editor, all in there. The same is true with PuzzleScript, and I think providing constructive constraints is something that really excites me, maybe obvious in the 8x8 grids. So I think that's why I'm drawn to them to some degree.
Great, thanks. Is there any other, probably time for one or two more questions? Yep.
Thank you for that. I think I heard you say you used shoes in your early quilts. Is that correct?
I have. I had an industrial machine, so.
Okay, I was just curious about how a shoe, which is a 3D object, ends up in a quilt.
I think I did that one once, but if we jump back here, okay, let's see. There's some envelopes here, clothes with holes in them. I don't know. I always found it a challenge and kind of fun to use other materials. When you have an industrial, you can kind of sew whatever you want. So, yeah, it'll take it.
One final question from anybody? Yep.
Sorry, maybe I missed it, but you mentioned a couple other quilting communities. Is there like cross dialogue between the digital versions of these and then the analog communities? And like, what do you see the relationship between the two of them?
It's a great question. I don't think there's a digital quilting community. If there is, I don't know it yet. Maybe there is. Although actually through the process of preparing this and getting feedback from reviewers, I did learn of lots of people working in this field and realm. And if you have other suggestions, come up and tell me. I'd love to hear more, or get in contact if you're streaming online. I don't know how much dialogue there is between different communities, between the digital and those that are, let's say, analog sewing and quilting and things like that. I don't know personally. In my previous experience, when I used to sew quilting, I didn't know much about people that are coming from maybe a computational background or interest. So I don't know how much of that is in flux between the two, but to me, just like the Algorithmic Pattern Salon brings together these various different communities, it seems like a natural way.
Maybe you should set one up.
Happy to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee. Okay, so we're going to welcome our final speaker for the day. So Berenice Gassa-Corton is going to talk to us about stenography within textiles.
Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay.
Hi, my name is Berenice. I'm going to try to do my best with English. I'm happy to that I managed to be here today with you. So my main practice is textile and mainly weaving. So I do weaving as with manual looms and also digital looms when I also use manual and digital, so programming and also manual weaving. But I have other just wooden looms in my atelier and stuff like that. And I also like to create looms for people to use. So this was an installation at the Centre Pompidou Metz in the east of France, which was it was like linked to an exhibition about video games actually, but it was representing a screen, like the RGB pixel of a screen, but with a like manual loom, like frame loom. So you had the warp threads, which are the vertical ones, and people would weave the weft threads. And when they were weaving, it was creating sound because it was connected to a controller, a microcontroller. So that was an interactive piece that was there. And I also do weavings. So this is like a jacquard weaving. So this one, it was like, so I wove it actually on like the other direction. Which is 1,320 thread warp loom. And this is jacquard. So jacquard, I think many people know here, but it's you can control all of the threads of the warp individually. And this you can control with a program, but you also need to be knowing how to weave to do it, because it's you're still weaving. And it used to be with punch cards. So this was a series of weavings. This is like 1 meter 20 or something like that. And it's, I imagine a community of hacking weavers hidden in the woods that would send each other secret messages. And she's representing the mokosh, which is a Slavic figure of weaving. It's more like the mother of weaving, but she's more like a bit cybery. So cryptology, cryptography, and steganography, I started to look at how to actually hide messages or like poetry into weavings. And so cryptology is the science of studying secret messages. Cryptography is the act of writing secret messages, and you need the other person to have the key. And then steganography is you can hide in sound or visual messages, and it's not necessarily visible for the people that see it, but then they are like, for example, in visual, it's like you have some pixels that change and stuff, and you have a tons of programs that do it also nowadays, but I wanted to invent a kind of way to do steganography, so it's quite personal. This weaving, for example, I have it here, so I'm going to pass it around. But it's basically representing the lighthouse of a place in the west of France that is called Notre-Dame-des-Landes. So it's like a resisting place where they resisted against the construction of airports, and still people live there. That I've been visiting there a few times, and I wanted to hide the poem of Susan Sachs, that was activist, and she was asked by some FBI agent to give the names of her other women in her network. So that's what she replied. Who calls the roots work to resist, and what clandestine hand inscribe the coded message in the seed? Who masterminds the spider's web and plans the strategy of the weed? There's like, it's like a whole poem. It's quite hard to find even online, but there has been like a translation also in French, so that's how I got to find it. And in the textile that I'm gonna show around, there is like different zones of the fabric where there is like the first letter of the words of the poem, which an alphabet that I invented. But so I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna try to shoot here. So here you have like different zones with different symbols. So they are creating the contrast. And yeah, I'm just gonna. Sorry, just for. No, I mean you can. So you have like different zones of the fabric which have a different pattern, and each pattern is actually a letter. So you can, I mean, I'm gonna pass it around and you can see better. So these are the letters that are the first letters of the words of the poem. So yeah, I have like.
There's a glass magnifier that's going around with it for those people online.
I was like looking for more like microscopic camera, and then I was like, actually, just like glass magnifier is gonna be. Yeah. So one of the reasons why I started to wonder how to hide messages was because my grandfather was a cryptologist, and I'm not a cryptologist, but I textile craft, so I wanted to know how this has been used. And there have been like stories of textiles just sent to each other during the wars to like hide messages, and like jerseys were actually forbidden to be sent because they were like binary messages that were hidden in them. But it's like there is really little information, because obviously it's this like really crafty woman-y thing, which is actually great, I think. And so my grandfather was a Polish cryptologist, and during the Second World War he was decoding the Enigma machine with a team that was brought from Poland to France, actually. In a way, unfortunately, they didn't come to the UK because the story then went pretty bad for them. But the advances that they made on the Enigma machine, so which was this machine on the left, which is a writing machine where you type a letter, it's another letter that comes up, and then but you type the same letter, it's another one again, so it constantly changes. I mean, many of you know the story, and you had rotors, which are the things on the top that you see, that they added, like the Nazis added more and more during the war, which made it more difficult and more combinations possible, because they were like changing the combinations. So my grandfather was basically like crafting these machines, and also he was like 18 when he came to France to do that. And it became a bit public in the 70s that Rejewski was the one that actually decoded Enigma and then passed the information to Alan Turing. But nowadays it's like trying to, we're having these informations that were kind of hidden for a while and then just reappear, but it's like a constant kind of archiving and meeting people that are related to that. But also because I think nowadays it can be inspiring for like what's the situation in the world. And yeah, so what I started to think about was that I compared the Enigma machine and the jacquard that I was using. Many people say it's crazy, but look, like it's like you had this like, so on top it's the Enigma machine with the bomba on the left, which were mainly used by women. Actually, here I wrote down a writer, Elsa Boyer, that is a philosopher from France, and she wrote about a gender relationship to Bletchley Park and Alan Turing. story. And so apart from showing reproduced work, gendered hierarchy that was happening at Bletchley Park, where women were realizing more repetitive tasks than men, that Elsa Boyer highlights in her biography about Turing, it also shows the craft of repetition that was occurring. And obviously the number of people you need, because like my grandfather was in a team of like maybe 10 people, and at Bletchley Park, where I went a few days ago, actually, there were like 600, like, I don't know, 700, 600 women, actually, like young as well. So this was the time that people were actually machines, basically, or like programs, and with the Colossus, etc. And so here I represented the Zygalki sheets on the right, which was at the step of when the Polish were doing more like crafty things with the Enigma and making them themselves. So I know my grandfather was like punching the holes by himself. Then it became more industrial, let's say, when it got to Bletchley Park and stuff. And it really looks like the kind of punch cards from the Jacquard, the old Jacquard looms, and this in the middle is like a draft, which looks more like what you use for drafting textile still, which is like pretty much coding. Like, so I imagine like, okay, what would be a loom? This is a drawing I'm making, but the machine doesn't exist yet. But what if a loom could have rotors that could change the order of the threads, and then we would be able to change the pixel of the weavings like that. But for now, I didn't make this machine. It's just in my head. But I was thinking of an alphabet that could make me hide codes in the construction and the patterns. So that's what you see in the weaving, which are these little symbols that you actually can't really perceive like how they look like, but it's actually like on the screen you can see it better. So for example, this was the letter A, and then there's like a whole alphabet, and the letter A was coming from, it's like a more personal journey of places that were representing resistance. And this one was at the place where my grandfather was hidden in the south of France before they got caught by the Nazis. And this is what the picture I took looked like, and this is the simplified version, and here it's more like the binary code, so like indicating where the thread goes up or down. And then here it's like the repetitive one. So what you see on the fabric is actually like the pattern repeated. Yeah. So this is an alphabet, the first alphabet that I made out of this idea. And I also have one because then I started to ask people about other alphabets of other places. And so each letter is a symbol, and then it's the repetitive representation here. So I wanted to try something here, which is basically, so you will see that my use of a computer is mainly to weave and administrative tasks. So let's see how this is going. Okay. So here I have the draft of fabric on a Adobe loom, which is less complicated than a Jacquard loom, but still I can control it with a computer, just the different frames where the warp threads are connected to. So here you have the 24 heddles. The vocabulary is right. And then here I just invented this way of making the weft, so the thread. This is what I'm weaving manually, basically. And here it's how I set up the loom. So here I was looking at, like, I don't know anything about Sheffield, sorry, but obviously it has a big story. And I was looking at this Paradise Square that could be representing a place of resistance, because I've seen like there've been a lot of political things happening there. So what if this was a symbol and I was representing it here? So I started to like draw a little bit. I don't have much time, so I'm just gonna do it like very quickly here. and this is like, I would rather have you do this, but normally I have people like drawing their own symbols, and then I weave them in a performance, and then last time in Germany I gave the fabric to the spot. And then if I take, for example, this image and I put it in SSTV, it's going to be a bit loud maybe, so if it's, and then I import it in this slow scan TV, which sends radio waves, short radio waves, that is like translating an image, like each line of an image into a radio signal. I imagine, okay, we can send each other these like patterns of weaving, and then we send each other the actual real weaving in order to hide messages and send it to community. I'm like open if you have ideas how to, but this sound, this like the sound is going to be a bit terrible, but so now it's like translating. Voilà. I also brought this textile that is like the last piece I made. I'm not gonna turn it around because it's like it's recently made, but it's the symbols of places in Trier, so in west of Germany. Sorry, it's in the west of Germany. So I can put it here, and people can come closer also at the end if they want, so that you have a better idea of the alphabet. Is it okay on the floor? Yes. Are you sure? Yeah, I think so. Voilà. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just check the time. We've got a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question they would like to, or feedback or thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, that was bloody incredible, like amazing. Thank you so much. Is this like ham radio software? Like
yeah, so my friend Adriana Knuf shared with me this program, which I'm like really a kid looking at it. I have like basic knowledge about it. Yeah. But yeah, it's like a shortwave radio signal, and it's like amateur radio. Yeah. So it was like to send like one image of a TV one by one that they translated into radio signals. Yeah, so.
Any other questions from the audience? I've not actually checked online. Is there anything online? Okay.
Or comments or anything?
When your granddad got captured by the Nazis, what was the outcome?
The outcome?
Of his capture?
He didn't die because I'm here. But so yeah, he survived, and the outcome is like huh? No, they didn't escape. They just waited. No, they potentially had to do like some work there. And the rest of the team that he was with, they both died there. And he was like the youngest, so I think that's how he survived. And also he knew many languages, so I think he was kind of like, he used to be like, you know, like a spy, so he was just there like, But yeah, he escaped from a bombing like 50 meters away from him, so that's, yeah. And we are working on a documentary with a Polish director that lives in New York, and he was interested about this interlink. story, because it's like I have like everything I learn is from, I don't know, going somewhere, meeting people, and because he was not sharing anything about it, now he died, and my mom was also interested, but she died as well, so it's like just meeting, like I actually met Dermot Turing like a few days ago at Bletchley Park, because like I'm still interested, like he never went to Bletchley Park actually, but there were like a lot of links, so it's, and there was a book there that I was happy to see that my mom helped giving images when I was a kid, and the book is like sold at Bletchley Park. So even though the Polish are still like not really talked about, there is still things about it. Yeah.
I think we've got one more question.
Thank you so much for the great talk. And now that you know how to, or that you have the power for encryption, what is your biggest dream or project, the most ambitious thing that have happened in your mind to encrypt?
That's like a big question. Like right now I've been going to lots of communities because I'm kind of looking for community of hackers, and I think like I'm hacking in a way that, you know, I don't know if it would save a war, but so like I would love to, I don't know, I'm not thinking like, okay, the war needs to be tomorrow, but I don't know, just like, yeah, create a community and be able to like connect to others, and that's why I'm like going from one community to another to see how we share this knowledge and how we can, if something happens, we can communicate. That's a bit like, yeah, a dream. Yeah, I mean that would be great. For now, I'm writing with weavings basically, so I'm like, but I also like to write. So maybe. I also do performances, and actually now we're gonna do a exhibition in Poland because they opened a museum about Enigma 3 years ago. Which is pretty new in Poznan in the west, and so it took time because it's quite like scientific and stuff, but they were wanting to have a more artistic exhibition, so we're gonna do that in November with performances as well and archives and stuff, and yeah, just being able to continue and share with others. I also teach, so I think that's like a really good thing, because then I have all of my little like textile hackers that I can just like, and then I'm like, okay, so how do you hide something? And I'm like, oh, I use Morse code, and I'm like, oh, great.
Great, thank you so much, Berenice.
Thank you.
So that's the end of this panel and our day of talks. I might hand over to Alex and just ask if you'd like to say anything about tonight's sound events.
Lucy, do you want to say anything about this?
Oh, well, that's put me on the spot. Yeah, so I think there are very few tickets left for tonight. So if you do want to come and you haven't got a ticket, I would recommend you buy that ASAP. I think there are about 10 or 12 tickets left. So we'll be at 2 venues which are next door to each other, Delicious Clam and Punker. So it's like a 2-stage event. We've got, I think, 13 performances happening, including the fabulous Yaxi, godfather of live coding. Sorry. Thanks, Yaxi. And Digital Selves, who was here earlier. I can't see her now. Who's also amazing. The amazing James Holden. I'll stop listing people. Pasta Gang, which you can all come along and be part of if you want to. I'm not going to list everyone because then I've just embarrassed myself by picking probably my favourite people who are playing. So now you all know my biases. But yeah, starting from about 7 p.m. at Delicious Clam, there'll be the chicken pen plotter drop-in workshop happening as well in the downstairs of Pancake, and we'll go till probably about 2 a.m. So please come, it'll be really fun. It's 1 ticket for both venues. It's a different place, yeah. Yeah, so the venues, they're on a pedestrianised street. They're right next door to each other. It's called Exchange Street. And we'll have a kind of fencing outside to like attach the two venues together, basically. So it's one ticket and it's like a 2-stage event, so you just go backwards and forwards. There's a detailed timetable available on the reception desk as well, so you can see exactly how it fits together. Any other questions? Okay, lovely.
So it's just down to me to say, please help stack the chairs at the side of the room. Thank you. And thanks very much for coming.